Hi, I'm Claire Donovan. For 6 years, I gave up my weekends to keep my father's diner alive while my brother Derek built an empire and acted like flipping pancakes was beneath him. They called me the failure. The one who stayed stuck. The daughter who couldn't let go. But when Dad's memory started slipping and the bills started piling up, I was the only one standing in that kitchen at 5 in the morning. Derek showed up once a month in his Tesla, stayed for exactly 20 minutes, and left behind nothing but judgment and the faint smell of expensive cologne. He never saw the grease burns on my hands or the exhaustion in Dad's eyes. He never asked. And when everything fell apart, when the truth came crashing down in front of everyone he tried to impress, he wasn't the golden child anymore. He was just a man in an expensive suit who forgot where he came from. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning air in Pinewood was sharp and cold, the kind that bit at your cheeks and made your breath hang in front of you like a ghost. I pulled my jacket tighter as I walked up to Frankie's Corner Diner, the neon sign flickering in that familiar rhythm it had for the past decade. One of these days it would die completely, but not today. Not on my watch. Inside, the warmth hit me immediately. The smell of coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, toast browning in the ancient toaster that Dad refused to replace because it still worked just fine. Tommy was already at the grill, flipping eggs with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He nodded at me as I tied my apron around my waist. "Morning, Claire. Your dad's in the back." I found him in the small office, staring at a stack of invoices spread across the desk like a losing hand of cards. His reading glasses sat crooked on his nose, and his hair, more silver than brown now, stuck up in the back where he'd been running his fingers through it. He didn't hear me come in at first. When he finally looked up, his smile was tired but genuine. "There's my girl," he said, his voice rough from years of calling out orders and greeting customers. "You didn't have to come in so early." "Yes, I did," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Because if I didn't, you'd be out there doing everything yourself and we'd have another incident like last month." He waved a hand dismissively, but we both knew what I was talking about. He'd forgotten to turn off the stove after closing. Mrs. Gomez, who lived in the apartment above the diner, had smelled smoke and called me at midnight. By the time I got there, Dad was standing in the kitchen, confused and upset, insisting he'd already checked everything. The doctor had called it early-stage cognitive decline. "Manageable," he said, "with the right support and routines." What he didn't say was how terrifying it was to watch your father, the man who taught you how to ride a bike and balance a budget, start to lose pieces of himself. "I've got the supply order ready," Dad said, tapping the papers in front of him. "Just need to call it in." "I'll handle it," I said gently. "You should get out front. The morning crowd will be here soon, and you know how much they love seeing you." His face brightened at that. Frank Donovan loved his customers. He knew their names, their orders, their grandkids' birthdays. This diner wasn't just a business to him. It was his life's work, his legacy, the place where he'd raised me and my brother after Mom passed when we were kids. Derek didn't see it that way. To him, Frankie's was a relic. A symbol of everything he'd worked so hard to escape. I thought about the last time he'd visited. 3 weeks ago, on a Sunday afternoon when the lunch rush had just ended. He'd walked in wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than our monthly rent, his shoes so polished they reflected the overhead lights. He didn't sit at the counter like he used to when we were kids. He stood near the door, checking his phone, acting like the smell of fried onions was an assault on his senses. "Claire," he'd said, barely looking up. "We need to talk about Dad." I'd been wiping down tables, my hands red and raw from hours of washing dishes because our dishwasher had broken again and we couldn't afford to fix it yet. "What about him?" "He's not getting any younger. This place is falling apart. You can't keep propping it up forever." I'd stopped wiping and looked at him directly. "I'm not propping it up. I'm helping him run his business." Derek had sighed, the kind of sigh that said he was dealing with someone who just didn't get it. "Claire, you're 32 years old. You're spending every weekend in a dying diner instead of building a real career. Do you know how that looks? To who? To your friends in Portland? To the people at your company who've never set foot in Pinewood? He'd pocketed his phone and stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was about to share some profound wisdom. I'm trying to help you. Both of you. Dad should be retired. You should be doing something with your life. This isn't sustainable. Then help, I'd said, my voice sharper than I intended. Come in on weekends. Learn the register. Talk to the suppliers. Be here. He'd laughed. Actually laughed. I run a company, Claire. I have responsibilities. And I don't? He hadn't answered. He just looked around the diner one more time, his expression a mixture of pity and disdain, and left. 20 minutes, just like always. I'd watched his Tesla pull away, sleek and silent, and felt something crack inside me. Now, standing in Dad's office, I pushed those thoughts away and focused on the invoices in front of me. Numbers didn't lie. We were behind on payments. Again. The equipment was breaking down faster than we could repair it. And Dad's medical bills were starting to pile up on top of everything else. I heard the bell above the door chime as the first customers arrived. Mrs. Gomez, right on time, with her newspaper tucked under her arm. Mr. Harrison, who always ordered the same thing, black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast. The Chin family, who came every Saturday after their daughter's soccer practice. These people weren't just customers. They were neighbors. Friends. The fabric of this town. And Frankie's was where they gathered, where they celebrated birthdays and mourned losses and simply existed together. Derek didn't understand that. He'd left Pinewood the day after high school graduation and never really looked back. He went to college in California, got his MBA, climbed the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. By the time he was 30, he was running his own consulting firm in Portland. Apex Solutions. He had a corner office, a penthouse apartment, and a wife who wore heels that cost more than our monthly grocery bill. I'd gone to community college. Started nursing school because I wanted to help people, wanted to make a difference. But halfway through my second year, Mom's medical bills had crushed us, and Dad needed help keeping the diner afloat. So I dropped out, picked up shifts, learned every position in the restaurant from dishwasher to line cook to manager. Derek had called it giving up. I called it showing up. The morning passed in the usual blur of activity. Orders shouted, plates delivered, coffee refilled, small talk exchanged. I moved through it all on autopilot, my body remembering every motion even when my mind wandered. Around 10, during a brief lull, I stepped outside for air. The street was quiet, a few cars parked along the curb, the mountains visible in the distance under a pale sky. I leaned against the brick wall and closed my eyes, just for a moment. That's when I heard it. The low, almost silent hum of an electric engine. I opened my eyes and saw Derek's Tesla pulling into the parking lot. My stomach tightened. He stepped out, dressed casually today, jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost a month of my rent. His hair was perfectly styled, his expression unreadable behind expensive sunglasses. He walked toward me with that confident stride he'd perfected over the years, the walk of someone who'd never been told no. Claire, he said, pulling off his sunglasses. We need to talk. About what? He glanced toward the diner, then back at me. Dad called me last night. He was confused. Asked me when Mom was coming home. My chest ached. I'd gotten a similar call 2 nights ago. Dad had been disoriented, couldn't remember what year it was, kept asking for Mom even though she'd been gone for 15 years. I know, I said quietly. It's getting worse. Derek's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought I saw genuine concern in his eyes, but it vanished quickly, replaced by that familiar businesslike determination. We need to make some decisions. Real ones. About his care. About this place. What kind of decisions? He looked at the diner again, his expression hardening. He can't keep doing this. And neither can you. It's time to sell. The words hit me like cold water. Sell? The building, the business, all of it. I've already talked to a developer who's interested in the property. We could get a decent price, enough to cover Dad's care in a good facility and give you a fresh start somewhere else. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. You want to sell Dad's diner? The place he built from nothing. The place where he and Mom raised us. It's just a building, Claire. No, I said, my voice rising. It's not just a building. It's his life. It's his identity. You take that away from him, and what does he have left? Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to that condescending tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable. He has a daughter who's sacrificing her entire future to keep a failing business alive. He has medical bills we can't afford. He has a condition that's only going to get worse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sentimentality doesn't pay for care, Claire. And what do you pay for? I shot back. You show up once a month for 20 minutes, pass judgment, and leave. You don't know what it takes to keep this place running. You don't know the people who depend on it. You don't know anything except how to look down at us from your penthouse. His face flushed, anger flashing in his eyes. I built something. I made something of myself. I'm not the one stuck in the same small town, doing the same thing, going nowhere. You think success is measured in office space and car brands, I said, my voice shaking now. You think because you wear expensive suits and have important meetings, you're better than this. Better than us. But you know what, Derek? You forgot where you came from. You forgot what matters. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked back inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a long moment, jaw clenched, before getting back in his Tesla and driving away. Dad was at the register, ringing up Mrs. Gomez. He looked up as I passed, his expression worried. Everything okay, sweetheart? I forced a smile. Everything's fine, Dad. Just Derek being Derek. But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. And as I tied my apron back on and returned to work, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break, something I wouldn't be able to fix with determination and stubbornness alone. The rest of the day crawled by. I kept my head down, focused on the work, tried not to think about Derek's words or the way he'd looked at the diner like it was a burden to be disposed of. By the time we closed at 8, my feet ached and my shoulders were tight with tension. Tommy left first, waving goodbye as he headed out to meet his girlfriend. Rita, our longtime waitress who only worked weekends now, gave me a hug before she left. You look tired, honey. Get some rest. I promised I would, even though we both knew I wouldn't. Dad was in the kitchen, slowly washing the last of the pots. I watched him for a moment, noticing how his hands shook slightly, how he had to pause and think about what he was doing. My heart squeezed. Let me finish that, I said, taking the scrub brush from him. I can do it, he protested weakly. I know you can. But let me help anyway. He dried his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter, watching me work. Derek came by today. I know. He's worried about me. I didn't respond, focusing on scrubbing the pot until it gleamed. He thinks I should sell the diner, Dad continued, his voice soft and sad. Maybe he's right. I stopped scrubbing and looked at him. Is that what you want? His eyes met mine, watery and tired. I want you to have a life, Claire. A real life. Not this. This is a real life, Dad. It's my life. And it's yours. And I'm not giving up on it. He smiled then, small and grateful, and reached out to squeeze my shoulder. You're just like your mother. Stubborn as hell. I learned from the best. We finished cleaning in comfortable silence. I locked up while Dad waited by the door, his coat buttoned wrong, but I didn't have the heart to fix it. We walked to our cars together, the parking lot empty and quiet under the streetlights. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. "See you tomorrow." I watched him drive away in his old pickup truck, the taillight flickering just like the diner sign, and felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. Derek wanted to sell. Dad was getting worse. The bills were mounting. And I was just one person, trying to hold together something that maybe was meant to fall apart. But I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Not ever. I got in my Honda, the seat worn and familiar, and sat there in the darkness for a long time before finally starting the engine and heading home. The following Tuesday, I was elbow deep in inventory when my phone buzzed on the metal shelf beside me. I wiped my hands on my apron and glanced at the screen. Derek's name flashed across it. I let it ring twice more before answering. "What do you want?" His voice came through clipped and efficient. "I'm coming by tomorrow evening. 6 o'clock. We need to discuss Dad's situation properly this time, without you storming off." I didn't storm off. I walked away from a conversation that was going nowhere. "Claire, this isn't about ego or feelings. This is about practical solutions. Dad needs more help than you can provide, and the diner is bleeding money. Those are facts." I leaned against the storage rack, feeling the cold metal through my shirt. "You've looked at the books?" "I don't need to look at the books. I can see it every time I walk in. The equipment is ancient. The place needs repairs you can't afford. You're one major breakdown away from closing, and you know it. Then help us fix it instead of trying to tear it down." He sighed, long and theatrical. "I'll be there tomorrow at 6. Try to keep an open mind." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, anger simmering in my chest. Keep an open mind. As if I was the problem. As if I was the one who'd abandoned everything Dad built. The next evening, I made sure everything was perfect. The floors gleamed. The counters were spotless. The coffee machine, temperamental as it was, hummed along without complaint. I wanted Derek to see what this place could be, what it was to the people who came here every single day. He arrived exactly at 6, punctual as always, but he wasn't alone. A woman stepped out of the passenger side of his Tesla, tall and elegant in a cream pantsuit that probably cost more than our entire month's utilities. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she carried a leather portfolio under one arm. "Claire," Derek said as they approached. "This is Vanessa Chen. She's a real estate consultant." I asked her to take a look at the property. My stomach dropped. "You brought a real estate consultant to Dad's diner." Vanessa extended her hand, her smile professional and distant. "It's nice to meet you. Derek's told me a lot about this place." I shook her hand because refusing would have been childish, but I couldn't hide the betrayal in my voice when I looked at Derek. "You're actually doing this?" "I'm exploring options," he said calmly. "That's what responsible people do when facing difficult situations." Dad emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His face lit up when he saw Derek, the way it always did, like he was still seeing the little boy who used to help bus tables after school. "Derek. You didn't tell me you were bringing a guest." "Hi, Dad. This is Vanessa. She's just here to look around, if that's okay." Of course, Dad said, beaming. "Any friend of Derek's is welcome here. Claire, get them some coffee." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to tell Vanessa to leave and Derek to take his plans and his consultant and his Tesla back to Portland. But Dad was smiling, happy to see his son, completely unaware that Derek was measuring his life's work for a coffin. So I poured coffee. I watched Vanessa walk slowly through the diner, taking notes on her tablet, examining the walls, the fixtures, the layout. She asked Dad questions about the building's history, the lot size, the surrounding businesses. He answered enthusiastically, proud of every detail, while Derek stood nearby with his arms crossed, watching everything with that calculating expression I'd come to hate. The location is excellent, Vanessa said after her tour concluded. High foot traffic, good visibility from the main road, ample parking. The building itself would need significant work, but the land value alone makes this an attractive property. Attractive for what? I asked, though I already knew. Redevelopment. There's a lot of interest in this area right now. Mixed-use buildings, upscale retail, residential units. The downtown revitalization project has developers looking at every available property. This property isn't available, I said firmly. Derek finally spoke. That's not your decision to make alone, Claire. It's Dad's decision. Not yours. Not mine. His. All three of them looked at Dad, who stood behind the counter looking confused and a little overwhelmed. I don't understand. Derek, what's this about? Derek's expression softened when he addressed our father. Dad, we're just talking about possibilities. Ways to make sure you're taken care of as things get harder. I'm fine, Dad said, but his voice wavered. The diner's fine. Dad, you called me 3 times last week asking me where Mom was. You forgot to lock the doors 2 nights ago, and Claire had to drive back at midnight. You're not fine, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. The words hit Dad like a physical blow. I saw him shrink, saw the shame and fear cross his face. My hands clenched into fists. Get out, I said quietly. Derek turned to me. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out. Both of you. Vanessa looked uncomfortable, gathering her things quickly. I'll wait in the car. But Derek didn't move. You can't keep hiding from reality, Claire. Dad needs professional care. The diner needs to be sold. And you need to stop throwing your life away on a fantasy that this can all somehow work out. The only fantasy here is you pretending you care about anything other than clearing your conscience, I shot back. You want to sell this place so you don't have to feel guilty about abandoning us. So you can tell yourself you did the responsible thing, the smart thing, while Dad loses everything that gives his life meaning. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? I've been here every single weekend for 6 years. I've covered shifts when Dad couldn't work. I've paid bills out of my own pocket. I've held his hand through doctor's appointments and cleaned up when he had accidents and reminded him 100 times that Mom isn't coming home. Where were you? Building your empire? Impressing clients? Buying another expensive watch? Derek's face flushed red. I have a career. I have responsibilities. So do I. The difference is I actually show up for mine. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Dad had sunk into a chair at the nearest table, his head in his hands. Seeing him like that, small and defeated, broke something in me. Derek looked at Dad, then at me, his expression hardening. This conversation isn't over. We'll talk again when you're ready to be reasonable. He left without another word. Through the window, I watched him and Vanessa get into the Tesla and drive away, the red taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. I went to Dad and knelt beside his chair. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have fought with him in front of you. He lifted his head, and I was shocked to see tears in his eyes. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am just a burden now. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. But it's true, isn't it? I can't remember things. I get confused. I make mistakes. And you're here cleaning up after me instead of living your own life. I took his hands in mine. They were rough and scarred from decades of work, strong hands that had built something real and lasting. This is my life, Dad. Being here with you, keeping this place running. I chose this. And I'd choose it again. He squeezed my hands, and we sat there together in the quiet diner, surrounded by empty tables and the ghosts of 1,000 shared meals. Outside, the town moved on with its evening routines, unaware that everything I loved was slowly slipping away. The weeks that followed were harder than I wanted to admit. Dad's episodes became more frequent. He'd forget where he put things, repeat the same stories multiple times in one conversation, get lost in the middle of tasks he'd done thousands of times before. Mrs. Gomez started watching him more carefully when I wasn't around. Tommy took on extra responsibilities without being asked. Even our customers noticed, speaking more slowly, being more patient when Dad took their orders. Derek called twice more, leaving voicemails about care facilities and financial planning and legal paperwork I needed to review. I deleted them without listening all the way through. I was exhausted. Physically, emotionally, spiritually drained. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. unable to fall back asleep, my mind racing with worries about bills and Dad's health and how much longer I could keep this going. My old nursing school friends had stopped inviting me out because I always said no. My tiny apartment felt like a place I just slept between shifts at the diner. One Saturday afternoon, during the lunch rush, everything nearly fell apart. Dad was at the grill, and I was taking orders at the front. The place was packed, every table full, a line forming at the door. The phone was ringing. The coffee machine started making a grinding noise that meant it was about to die again. And then I heard Tommy's voice from the kitchen, urgent and scared. "Claire. Come here." I pushed through the swinging door and found Dad standing motionless at the grill, a spatula in his hand, staring at the burners like he'd never seen them before. Smoke was rising from 2 burgers that were burning, and he wasn't moving to flip them. "Dad?" I said gently, taking the spatula from his hand. "Dad, it's okay. I've got it." He looked at me, his eyes distant and confused. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." My throat tightened. "It's okay. Why don't you take a break? Go sit in the office for a few minutes." Tommy had already moved to the grill, scraping off the burned burgers and starting fresh ones. Rita appeared in the doorway, took one look at the situation, and quietly led Dad toward the back. I stood there for a moment, spatula in hand, smoke stinging my eyes, and felt the full weight of it crash down on me. This wasn't sustainable. Derek was right about that, even if I hated admitting it. Something had to change. But selling the diner, putting Dad in a facility, walking away from everything we'd built together, that couldn't be the answer. There had to be another way. There had to be. I just had no idea what it was. That evening, after we closed and Dad had gone home, I sat alone in the dark diner with my laptop open on the counter. I'd been researching care options, financial assistance programs, small business loans, anything that might help. But every avenue seemed blocked. We didn't qualify for most assistance because technically we owned property. Loans required collateral we didn't have. Private care was impossibly expensive. I was so absorbed in the screen that I didn't hear the knock at first. When it came again, louder, I looked up to see a woman standing outside the glass door. She was maybe 60, with silver hair and kind eyes, wearing a practical coat and carrying a worn leather bag. I walked over and unlocked the door. "I'm sorry, we're closed." "I know," she said. "I'm not here for food. I'm Claire Donovan. Frank's sister. Your aunt." I stared at her, processing. Dad had a sister. I knew that, vaguely, from old stories, but she'd moved away decades ago and they'd lost touch. "Aunt Marianne? The one and only. May I come in? I've driven a long way, and we need to talk about your father." I stepped aside, too surprised to do anything else. She entered the diner, looking around with an expression of deep nostalgia. "It looks almost exactly the same. The layout, the counter, even that old Coca-Cola sign. Frank never could let go of things. How did you know where to find us?" She set her bag on a table and sat down slowly, like her bones ached. "I've been keeping tabs, loosely, over the years. I saw some posts online about the diner. Pictures. Comments from locals. And then I saw something else. Something that concerned me." My stomach tightened. "What did you see?" She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. It was Derek's LinkedIn profile, and the most recent post made my blood run cold. Excited to announce a new partnership between Apex Solutions and Cascade Development Group. Together, we're bringing revitalization and progress to communities across the Pacific Northwest. I don't understand, I said, though dread was already pooling in my gut. Cascade Development is the company that's been buying up properties in downtown Pinewood, Marianne said quietly. Small businesses, old buildings, anything they can get their hands on for their luxury mixed-use project. And your brother just became their consulting partner. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The real estate consultant. The pressure to sell. Derek's insistence that it was the only reasonable option. He wasn't just trying to help. He was trying to profit. He's using Dad, I whispered. He's using his own father to close a business deal. Marianne nodded grimly. I drove here as soon as I saw that post because I know Derek. I knew him when he was a boy, before he learned to measure everything in dollar signs. And I knew that if he was involved in this, Frank needed someone in his corner who could see through the corporate polish. I sank into the chair across from her, my hands shaking. What do I do? She reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. They were warm and steady, anchoring me. You fight. You document everything. You find allies. And you don't let him steamroll you just because he speaks the language of business and wears expensive suits. This diner belongs to your father. It's his choice what happens to it, not Derek's. Dad's not in a position to make clear decisions right now. Then you make them for him, with his best interests at heart. Not what's convenient. Not what's profitable. What's right. I looked around the dark diner, at the shadows cast by streetlights through the windows, at the worn booth cushions and scratched tables and everything that made this place real and lived in and loved. Derek saw a transaction. Dad saw a lifetime. I saw home. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, I admitted. Marianne squeezed my hand. Yes, you are. You're Frank Donovan's daughter. You've got more strength in your little finger than Derek has in his whole polished exterior. And you're not alone anymore. I'm here now. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than crushing weight. I felt a flicker of hope, small but stubborn, refusing to be extinguished. If Derek wanted a fight, he was going to get one. And this time, I wouldn't be facing him alone. Aunt Marianne stayed in Pinewood. She rented a small room above the hardware store 2 blocks from the diner and showed up every morning at 5:30, right when I unlocked the doors. She didn't ask permission. She just rolled up her sleeves and started working alongside me like she'd been doing it her whole life. Dad was confused at first when he saw her. He kept squinting at her face, trying to place her, until finally one morning it clicked. He'd been refilling the napkin dispensers when he stopped mid-motion and stared at her. Annie, he said, using the childhood nickname I'd never heard before. Is that really you? She looked up from the coffee urn she was cleaning, and her eyes went soft. It's me, Frankie. I'm back. He crossed the diner in 3 long strides and pulled her into a hug that made her laugh and cry at the same time. I turned away, giving them privacy, and wiped my own eyes with the corner of my apron. Whatever rift had separated them all those years ago seemed to dissolve in that moment, and I felt a gratitude so fierce it almost hurt. With Marianne there, the weight lifted slightly. She handled morning prep while I managed inventory. She chatted with customers while I dealt with suppliers. She sat with Dad during his confused moments and gently redirected him back to the present without making him feel ashamed. She was steady and capable and exactly what we needed. But she was also strategic. 2 days after she arrived, she sat me down after closing and pulled out a yellow legal pad covered in notes. I've been doing some digging, she said, pushing her reading glasses up her nose. Cascade Development has been very aggressive in this area. They've acquired 6 properties in the last 8 months, all of them small family businesses that couldn't afford to fight back. But there's something interesting. She flipped through her notes until she found what she was looking for. 3 of those sales are being contested. The owners claimed they were pressured, given incomplete information, or that the contracts contained clauses they didn't understand. One case is already in mediation. I leaned forward. So they have a pattern of predatory practices. Exactly. And if Derek is consulting for them, if he's helping them target properties, he's implicated in those practices. Especially if he's using personal relationships to facilitate sales. My mind raced ahead. We need documentation. Everything Derek said, every visit, every phone call. Do you have any of it recorded? I shook my head. But I can start now. And I can reach out to the other business owners who sold. See if they'll talk to me. Marianne smiled, sharp and satisfied. Now you're thinking like someone who's done with being pushed around. Over the next week, I became a different person. I still worked the diner, still helped Dad, still showed up every morning before dawn. But now I was also building a case. I recorded phone calls with Derek's permission, citing that I wanted to make sure I understood everything correctly for Dad's sake. He agreed, probably thinking it made him look transparent and trustworthy. I drove to neighboring towns during my few free hours and met with former business owners who'd sold to Cascade. Most were bitter and regretful. They told me stories of pressure tactics, of being told their buildings weren't up to code when they were, of contracts that promised one thing and delivered another. One older man who'd run a hardware store for 40 years actually cried when he described watching his life's work get demolished to make way for luxury condos. They said it was progress, he told me, his voice breaking. But all they did was erase us. I documented everything. Names, dates, specific claims. Marianne helped me organize it into a coherent timeline. We found connections between Cascade's acquisitions and Derek's consulting contracts. We built a picture of systematic exploitation, and Derek was right in the middle of it. But we needed more. We needed something concrete that tied Derek directly to what was happening with our diner. And we needed it before he made his next move, which Marianne assured me was coming soon. Men like Derek don't wait, she said. They see hesitation as weakness, and they strike. He'll push for a decision, probably with some kind of deadline or ultimatum. Be ready. She was right. The call came on a Thursday evening. I was closing up, wiping down the last table, when my phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. I hit record before answering. Claire, we need to meet. Tomorrow. I'm coming down with some people Dad needs to talk to. What people? Representatives from a care facility in Portland. They have an opening, but we need to move quickly. And I've got paperwork for the property sale ready to sign. It's time to make this official. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm. Dad hasn't agreed to any of this. Dad's not capable of making these decisions anymore, and you know it. I've already consulted with an attorney. Given his cognitive decline, I can petition for medical power of attorney. It'll be easier if you're on board, but I can do it without you. The threat was clear. Sign over the diner willingly, or he'd take legal action to get control anyway. I thought about the recordings I had, the testimonies from other business owners, the connections Marianne had uncovered. We weren't ready yet. We needed more time. Fine, I said, hating the word even as it left my mouth. Come tomorrow. But I want to see everything. The care facility information, the sale paperwork, all of it. No more surprises. Of course. I'll be there at 4. And Claire? Thank you for being reasonable. The line went dead. I stood in the empty diner, the phone still in my hand, and felt rage burn through my exhaustion. Thank you for being reasonable. As if capitulation was reasonableness. As if giving up everything Dad loved was the mature choice. I called Marianne immediately. She answered on the first ring. He's making his move, I said. Tomorrow at 4. He's bringing people from a care facility and paperwork to sell the diner. Good. That gives us time to prepare. I'll make some calls tonight. And Claire? Don't show your hand yet. Let him think he's winning. The next day felt like preparing for battle. I went through all the motions at the diner, smiling at customers, refilling coffee, taking orders. But my mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, planning responses, trying to anticipate Derek's tactics. Dad sensed something was wrong. He kept watching me with concerned eyes, asking if I was feeling all right. I told him I was just tired, which wasn't a lie. I was exhausted down to my bones. At 3:30, Marianne showed up even though it wasn't her usual shift. She didn't explain why she was there, and I didn't ask. She just took up a position at the counter and waited with me. Derek arrived exactly at 4, and he wasn't alone. 2 people accompanied him, a man and a woman, both wearing professional attire and carrying folders. Behind them was someone I didn't expect, Vanessa, the real estate consultant from before. They entered the diner like they owned it, Derek leading the way with that confident stride. The few remaining customers looked up curiously before returning to their meals. "Dad," Derek said warmly, walking to where our father sat at his usual table. "These are the people I told you about. This is Dr. Raymond Chen, he's the director of Maplewood Care Center. And this is Susan Park, she's a social worker who specializes in memory care." Dad looked overwhelmed, shrinking back in his seat. "I don't understand. Why are they here?" "They're here to help, Dad. To talk about options that'll make your life easier." I moved to stand beside Dad's table, positioning myself between him and Derek. "He doesn't need options. He's fine where he is." Derek's expression tightened, but he maintained his pleasant tone. "Claire, let's let the professionals speak. Dr. Chen, would you mind explaining what Maplewood offers?" The doctor launched into a clearly rehearsed pitch about memory care units, specialized staff, structured activities, 24-hour monitoring. It all sounded clinical and sterile and nothing like the warm chaos of the diner that Dad loved. "It sounds very nice," Dad said politely when the doctor finished. "But I'm happy at home. Claire takes good care of me." "Dad, Claire can't be with you all the time," Derek said, his patience starting to fray. "What happens when she's at work? What happens if you have an emergency?" "I manage," Dad said, his voice growing smaller. Susan, the social worker, leaned forward with practiced sympathy. "Mr. Donovan, it's very common for people in your situation to feel anxious about change. But sometimes the people who love us can see what we need better than we can see it ourselves." Marianne, who'd been silent until now, spoke up from her position at the counter. "And sometimes the people who claim to love us are more interested in what's convenient for them than what's actually best for us." Derek's head snapped toward her. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm Marianne Donovan. Frank's sister. I believe we met once when you were about 7 years old and stole a whole pie from this very diner. Frank made you work it off washing dishes for a week." A flicker of recognition crossed Derek's face, followed quickly by annoyance. "Aunt Marianne. I didn't know you were in town. There's a lot you don't know." That's becoming increasingly clear. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, and the care facility representatives exchanged uncertain glances. Derek tried to regain control. "This is a family matter. We appreciate your professionals coming out, but maybe we need a few minutes to discuss this privately first." Dr. Chen and Susan seemed relieved to escape. They left their folders on the table and headed outside, saying they'd wait in their car. Vanessa lingered near the door, clearly unsure whether she should stay or go. Once they were gone, Derek turned to me with barely contained frustration. "What is this, Claire? I'm trying to help, and you're turning it into some kind of circus." "Help?" I said, my voice rising. "You want to help? Then actually help. Come work shifts. Learn what Dad needs. Be present. Don't just show up with strangers and demand we upend everything. I have a job. A real job. I can't just drop everything to play restaurant." "And there it is," Marianne said softly. "The contempt. You think this place is beneath you. You think taking care of your father is beneath you. So you dress up your abandonment as pragmatism and tell yourself you're being the responsible one. Derek's face flushed red. You don't know anything about my life or my responsibilities. I know you partnered with Cascade Development, Marianne said, her voice cutting through his anger like a blade. I know they're buying up properties all over this area, displacing families, destroying businesses. And I know you're consulting for them, probably getting a nice commission for every property they acquire. The color drained from Derek's face. That's business. It has nothing to do with Dad or the diner. Doesn't it? I pulled out my phone and opened a document. Because I've been talking to the other business owners Cascade targeted. And they all tell similar stories. Pressure. Incomplete information. Consultants who came in acting helpful but were really just softening them up for the sale. I looked directly at Derek. You brought Vanessa here weeks ago to assess the property. You've been pushing Dad to sell ever since. And now you show up with care facility representatives and sale paperwork, creating a crisis so we have to make a quick decision. That's not help, Derek. That's manipulation. He opened his mouth to respond, but Vanessa spoke first. Derek, you told me this was a willing sale. You said your family wanted to move forward but needed guidance on the process. They do, Derek insisted. Claire's just being stubborn. I'm being protective, I corrected. Of Dad. Of his business. Of everything you're trying to take away because it's inconvenient for your deal with Cascade. Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You think you're protecting him? You're enabling him. You're letting him deteriorate in this falling apart building because you can't accept that things change. That people age. That sometimes love means making hard choices. And sometimes love means showing up, I shot back. Something you've never learned how to do. The door chimed, and we all turned. A man in his 50s entered, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, carrying a camera. He looked around the diner with interest before his eyes landed on our tense group. Sorry to interrupt, he said. I'm looking for Claire Donovan. I raised my hand slightly. That's me. I'm Marcus Webb. I'm a reporter with the Pinewood Chronicle. I heard there might be a story here about local businesses being pressured to sell to developers. Is this a good time? The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. I glanced at Marianne, who gave me the tiniest nod. She'd called him. She'd brought in a witness. Derek's expression shifted from anger to alarm. This is a private family discussion. You need to leave. Actually, Marcus said pleasantly, pulling out a notepad. I'm on public property in a business that's open to the public. And if there's a story about predatory development practices affecting our community, that's absolutely newsworthy. He turned to me. Ms. Donovan, would you be willing to talk about what's happening with your father's diner? I looked at Dad, who sat quietly at his table, looking lost and afraid. I looked at Marianne, who stood strong and solid at the counter. I looked at Derek, whose carefully constructed plan was unraveling in real time. Then I looked at Marcus Webb and said the words that would change everything. Yes. I'd like to tell you exactly what's been happening here. Derek moved fast, positioning himself between me and the reporter. His entire demeanor shifted, the anger replaced by smooth corporate charm. Mr. Webb, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is just a family having a difficult conversation about elderly care. There's no story here. Marcus didn't budge. He stood his ground with the ease of someone who'd been blocked before and knew how to work around it. With respect, Mr. Donovan, I'll let Ms. Donovan decide whether there's a story. Ma'am, you were saying? I felt Marianne's steady presence behind me, Dad's confused worry beside me, and something inside clicked into place. Fear had kept me silent for too long. Fear of conflict, of making things worse, of not being believed. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every small business owner who'd been sweet-talked out of their legacy. Every family manipulated into giving up what they'd built. My brother has been pressuring my father to sell this diner, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Not because it's failing or because Dad wants to sell, but because Derek is consulting for Cascade Development. The same company that's been systematically buying properties in downtown Pinewood. Marcus wrote quickly, his pen scratching across the notepad. Can you prove the connection between your brother and Cascade? His LinkedIn profile announces their partnership. It's public information. Derek's jaw clenched. Consulting for a company doesn't mean I'm involved in every transaction they make. No, Marianne interjected. But showing up here with a real estate assessor, pressuring Frank to sell, and coordinating the timing with Cascade's expansion plan suggests otherwise. Vanessa, still standing near the door, suddenly looked pale. Derek, you told me your father wanted to sell. You said he asked you to help facilitate it. He does want to sell, Derek insisted. He's just too confused to articulate it properly. I never said I wanted to sell, Dad said quietly, his voice cutting through the argument. Everyone turned to look at him. He stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the table for support. I never once said that, Derek. You said it. You decided it. You told me what I needed. The hurt in his voice was devastating. Derek's face softened for just a moment, something vulnerable flickering behind his eyes before the mask returned. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. The doctor said your judgment is impaired. My memory is failing, Dad said, and his voice cracked but didn't break. But I know what I love. I know what matters to me. This diner, these people, this town. I built this place with your mother. We raised you and Claire here. It's not just a building or a business. It's everything we were. He looked at Derek with such sadness that I had to turn away. You used to understand that. You used to help your mother frost cakes in that kitchen. You used to save your allowance to buy new menus. When did you forget? Derek said nothing. For the first time since he'd arrived, he had no smooth response, no corporate doublespeak. He just stood there, exposed. Marcus continued writing, then looked up. Mr. Donovan, are you saying you don't want to sell the diner? That's exactly what I'm saying. And you, Ms. Donovan, do you have documentation of your brother's pressure tactics? I pulled out my phone and showed him the folder of recordings, emails, texts. I have everything. Phone calls where he threatens legal action to get power of attorney. Messages pressuring us to make quick decisions. And I have testimonies from other business owners who sold to Cascade under similar circumstances. Derek finally found his voice. You recorded our conversations without telling me. I told you at the beginning of every call that I was recording for clarity. You gave verbal consent each time. His face went from red to ashen. Vanessa stepped forward, her professional composure cracking. Derek, if what she's saying is true, if you misrepresented the situation to me and potentially to Cascade, that's fraud. I could lose my license. Nobody misrepresented anything, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. This is a family disagreement being blown out of proportion. Marcus closed his notepad. I'd like to interview some of those other business owners you mentioned. Would you be willing to share their contact information? Absolutely. Don't do this, Claire, Derek said, and for the first time he sounded genuinely desperate. You'll regret it. Once this goes public, there's no taking it back. You're right, I said. And I should have done it sooner. He stared at me for a long moment, something I couldn't quite read passing across his face. Then he turned to Vanessa. We're leaving. She hesitated. I need to review my files on this property. If there are discrepancies in how the client's intentions were represented, I have to report them. Fine. Do whatever you need to do. Derek looked at Dad one last time. I was trying to help you. I hope you realize that before it's too late. He walked out without another word. Vanessa lingered, gathering the folders the care facility representatives had left behind. For what it's worth, she said quietly to me, I'm sorry. I should have verified the situation more thoroughly. After they left, the diner felt eerily quiet. Marcus finished his notes and promised to reach out once he'd done more research. Dad sank back into his chair, exhausted. Marianne locked the door and flipped the sign to closed even though it was only 4:30. "You did the right thing," she said to me. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow and scared. Derek wasn't going to let this go. He'd built his entire identity on being successful, on being the smart one who'd escaped small-town limitations. Being exposed as someone who'd exploit his own father for a business deal would destroy that image. The article ran 3 days later. Marcus had worked quickly, interviewing other business owners, reviewing public records of Cascade's acquisitions, and documenting the pattern of pressure tactics. The headline read, "Local businesses pressured by development firms' aggressive tactics." Derek's name appeared multiple times, always linked to properties where families had been pushed into selling. The response was immediate and intense. Social media exploded. Some people defended Derek, calling it smart business and saying the old properties needed to be replaced anyway. But more people were outraged. They shared their own stories of being pushed out, of watching their neighborhoods change beyond recognition, of feeling powerless against corporate interests. The Pinewood Chronicle's website crashed from traffic. Regional news outlets picked up the story. A television reporter showed up at the diner wanting to interview me and Dad. We declined, but the attention didn't stop. Neither did the backlash. Someone spray-painted "Traitor" on the side of Derek's office building in Portland. His business partners started distancing themselves. Cascade Development released a statement saying Derek had acted independently and they were reviewing their relationship with him. I felt sick watching it unfold. I'd wanted truth, not destruction. I'd wanted accountability, not a public execution. Marianne found me one evening sitting alone in the diner after close, staring at my phone as another wave of social media posts rolled in. Second thoughts? I don't know. I wanted to protect Dad and the diner. But I didn't want to ruin Derek's life. She sat beside me, her presence grounding. You didn't ruin his life. You revealed what he chose to do. There's a difference. He's still my brother. And he was still wrong. Those things can both be true. My phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. I almost didn't open it, expecting another angry message from someone who thought I'd gone too far or not far enough. But something made me click it. The message was brief. "This is Kevin Zhao. I'm a forensic accountant. I saw the article about your diner and Cascade Development. I think you should know there's more to this story. Can we talk?" I showed Marianne. She read it twice, her expression sharpening. "Call him. Now." I dialed the number. Kevin answered on the second ring, his voice professional but urgent. "Ms. Donovan, thank you for calling. I don't have much time, so I'll be direct. I was hired by Cascade Development 6 months ago to review their acquisition finances. What I found was concerning enough that I resigned and reported them to the State Business Bureau." My heart started pounding. "What did you find?" "Irregularities in how they're funding these purchases. Shell companies, offshore accounts, money moving through channels that suggest they're not operating entirely legally. But more relevant to your situation, I found payments made to a consulting firm called Apex Solutions. Your brother's company. Payments for what? That's the question. The invoices are vague. Strategic consulting, market analysis, community relations. But the amounts are substantial, and the timing aligns perfectly with property acquisitions. Including preliminary payments for a property on 4th Street that matches your diner's address." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Derek was getting paid to deliver our property. It appears that way. I can't prove it without access to his company's records, but the pattern is clear. And if he was receiving payments contingent on successful acquisitions while also pressuring family members to sell, that's not just unethical. It's potentially criminal. Marianne had been listening, her ear close to the phone. She grabbed a pen and paper. "Mr. Zhao, what would we need to prove this definitively?" "Documentation from Apex Solutions showing the payment structure," Email correspondence between Derek and Cascade about specific properties. Financial records proving he received money tied to acquisition outcomes. And if we had that documentation, what then? Then you'd have grounds for a lawsuit. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, elder exploitation. And Cascade would be facing serious legal consequences for their entire operation. After the call ended, Marianne and I sat in silence for several minutes. The information Kevin had provided changed everything. This wasn't just about Derek being a bad brother or making questionable business decisions. He'd commodified his own family. We need those records, I said finally. They're in his office or on his computer. Neither of which we have access to. I thought about Derek's visits to the diner, how he'd sometimes open his laptop at the counter to work while pretending to spend time with Dad. How he'd connected to our Wi-Fi because the signal was better than his phone's hotspot. How our router kept logs of every device that connected. We might have something, I said slowly. When Derek used our Wi-Fi, everything he accessed while connected would have gone through our network. If he checked work email or accessed company files, there might be traces. Marianne's eyes widened. Can you access those logs? Tommy might be able to. He's studying computer science. He's helped me with our website and payment systems. We called Tommy immediately. He showed up 20 minutes later with his laptop, excited by the challenge. It took him 2 hours of digging through router settings and network logs, but eventually he looked up with a grin. Got it. He accessed his email and some cloud storage files multiple times. I can see the timestamps and the document names. Some of them have Cascade in the file name. Can you access the actual documents? Not directly. But I can see that he downloaded them to his device while connected to your network. If you can get his laptop, I could potentially recover them even if he deleted them later. Or we could subpoena the cloud storage company. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. A thread we could pull. Marianne immediately called a lawyer friend of hers who specialized in business fraud. They had a long conversation while I paced the diner, my mind racing through possibilities and implications. When she hung up, her expression was grim but determined. Her name is Patricia Moreno. She's very interested in this case. She says if we can prove Derek received payments tied to property acquisitions, especially involving his own family, she can build a case not just against him but potentially against Cascade's entire operation in this region. What do we do now? We keep documenting. We collect every piece of evidence we can. And we wait for Derek to make his next move, because he will. Men who've been cornered don't retreat quietly. She was right. 2 days after Kevin Zhao's call, Derek showed up at the diner. It was early, before we'd officially opened. I was alone, doing prep work in the kitchen. I heard the door and assumed it was Marianne or Tommy arriving early. Instead, I found Derek standing in the dining area. He looked terrible. Unshaven, his hair uncombed, his clothes rumpled. The polished corporate executive was gone, replaced by someone raw and desperate. We need to talk, he said. I dried my hands on a towel, keeping the stainless steel prep counter between us. I don't think there's anything left to say. Please, Claire. Just 5 minutes. Something in his voice made me pause. He sounded broken in a way I'd never heard before. I nodded slowly, and he sank into the nearest booth. I've lost 3 clients since that article ran. My partnership with Cascade is finished. Vanessa filed a formal complaint about my conduct. My own firm is talking about removing me from leadership. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. You destroyed everything I built. I revealed what you did. That's not the same thing. Do you have any idea what it took to build Apex Solutions? How many hours I worked? How many sacrifices I made? Yes, actually. I watched you do it. I watched you choose your career over everything else, including your family. So I know exactly what it took. He flinched. I was trying to be successful. To make something of myself. Is that so wrong? No. What's wrong is you decided success meant being better than where you came from. Better than Dad. Better than this diner. Better than me. And when you had a chance to help us, you saw us as a transaction instead of family. That's not fair. Isn't it? I leaned against the counter, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Derek, you brought a real estate consultant to assess Dad's property without telling him. You pressured him to sell when he was vulnerable. You used his cognitive decline as leverage. And now I'm finding out you were getting paid by Cascade to deliver properties, including ours. His face went pale. How did you know about the payments? Does it matter? It's true, isn't it? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. We sat in silence for a long moment, the early morning light filtering through the windows, dust motes floating in the air. I never meant for it to go this far, he said finally. It started as consulting, just advisory work. But then they started tying my fees to successful acquisitions. And yes, they mentioned your property specifically. They knew you and Dad were struggling. They thought it would be an easy sell. And you didn't correct them. I thought I was helping. I genuinely believed selling was the right choice. That Dad would be better off in professional care. That you needed to move on with your life. You thought what was convenient for you was best for us. There's a difference. He scrubbed his hands over his face. I know that now. I've had a lot of time to think this week. About who I became. About what I prioritized. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry, Claire. For all of it. The apology hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to accept it, to rebuild some connection with my brother. But another part, the part that had watched Dad shrink under Derek's pressure, that had documented testimonies from other families he'd helped displace, that part wasn't ready to forgive. I appreciate you saying that. But an apology doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't help the families Cascade pushed out of their properties. It doesn't give back what was taken. I know. And I'll have to live with that. But I came here to tell you something else. Cascade is planning to fight back. They're preparing a lawsuit against you for defamation. They're claiming the article damaged their reputation and business prospects. My stomach dropped. On what grounds? Everything in the article was true. They don't care. They want to intimidate you into silence. Bury you in legal fees until you can't afford to fight anymore. Why are you warning me? He stood up slowly, and for the first time in years, he looked at me the way he used to when we were kids. Like I was his little sister he was supposed to protect. Because I'm done helping them. And maybe, if I can't fix what I broke, I can at least stop it from getting worse. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive, setting it on the table between us. This has everything. Emails, financial records, contract terms. Everything you need to prove what Cascade was doing and my part in it. Give it to your lawyer. I stared at the small device, barely able to process what he was offering. Derek, this will incriminate you. I know. But it'll also stop them from going after anyone else. Including you. He walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. For what it's worth, you were right. About all of it. You're the one who stayed. Who showed up. Who actually understood what family means. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see that. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. I stood alone in the empty diner, holding the USB drive that contained both evidence and confession, proof and consequences, the truth that would change everything. The lawsuit never came. Within 48 hours of me delivering Derek's USB drive to Patricia Moreno, Cascade Development issued a public statement announcing they were ceasing all operations in Pinewood and divesting from properties they'd already acquired. The State Business Bureau launched a formal investigation. 3 executives resigned. Derek's testimony became central to the case. He cooperated fully, providing documentation and depositions that unraveled years of questionable practices. It cost him everything he'd built. Apex Solutions dissolved. His professional reputation was shattered. His marriage ended quietly, Vanessa filing for divorce and moving back to Seattle. But something strange happened in the aftermath. Derek started showing up at the diner. Not once a month for 20 minutes. Actually showing up. He'd arrive early on Saturday mornings and ask what needed doing. At first, I didn't trust it. I gave him tasks away from customers, washing dishes and taking out trash. He did them without complaint. Weeks passed. He learned the rhythms of the place. How to time the breakfast rush, which regulars liked their coffee before they even sat down, when to stay out of Dad's way and when to step in. He wasn't good at it, not like Tommy or Mary Ann, but he tried. That counted for something. Dad was confused at first, asking why Derek was there, forgetting the answer, asking again an hour later. But gradually, something softened in him. One morning I found them in the kitchen together, Derek watching as Dad demonstrated the proper way to fold an omelet. Dad's hands shook, and the eggs broke apart, but Derek didn't rush him or take over. He just listened. The diner stabilized. Not because we suddenly had more money or fixed all the broken equipment, but because we had help. Real help. Mary Ann handled morning prep with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing it her whole life. Derek covered afternoon shifts when I needed to take Dad to appointments. Tommy managed our online presence, setting up delivery options that brought in new revenue. Mrs. Gomez organized a community fundraiser. Other local businesses, grateful that Cascade had been stopped, contributed. We raised enough to replace the coffee machine, fix the walk-in cooler, and repair the roof. It wasn't a fortune, but it was breathing room. Kevin Zhao stopped by one afternoon with his wife and 2 kids. They ordered lunch and stayed for 2 hours, the kids coloring on paper placemats while Kevin told me about the ongoing investigation. His testimony had been crucial. Other accountants had come forward with similar findings from other Cascade projects across the state. The case was building into something much larger than our small diner. Spring arrived slowly, the mountains shedding their snow, the air warming. Dad had good days and bad days. Sometimes he remembered everything clearly. Other times he thought Mom was still alive, that Derek and I were children, that the year was 1995. We learned to meet him wherever he was, not forcing him back to a present that confused and frightened him. On a sunny morning in April, Derek and I stood outside the diner before opening. The neon sign had finally been replaced, bright and steady, no more flickering. He looked tired but somehow lighter, like he'd been carrying weight for years and finally set it down. "I got a job offer," he said. "Teaching business ethics at the community college. Part-time, nothing fancy. But I think I'd be good at it. Turns out I know a lot about what not to do." I smiled despite myself. "That sounds right. I'd still come help on weekends. If you want me to." Dad would like that. We stood in comfortable silence, watching early morning traffic pass on the street. Pinewood was waking up, the town continuing on like it always had, resilient and stubborn and more important than any development plan could acknowledge. "I'm selling the penthouse," Derek said. "Downsizing. Turns out I don't need all that space to prove I'm someone." "Who are you now?" He considered the question seriously. "I'm still figuring that out. But I think I'm someone who shows up. Someone who stays. Someone more like you." Inside the diner, I heard Dad's voice calling for help with something. Derek moved immediately toward the door. I followed, and together we stepped into the warm familiar chaos of the morning rush beginning, the smell of coffee and bacon, the sound of Tommy joking with customers, Mary Ann's laughter from the kitchen. This was never about the building or the business. It was about belonging to something larger than yourself. About showing up not when it was convenient but when it mattered. About understanding that success wasn't measured in property values or corner offices but in the faces of people who knew your name, who saved you a seat, who showed up when you needed them. Derek had spent years running from this place, trying to prove he'd evolved beyond it. What he learned, what we both learned, was that evolution wasn't about escape. It was about growth. About becoming someone worthy of the legacy you'd been given. The diner was full now, every table occupied, the morning light streaming through clean windows. Dad stood at the register, a little slower than he used to be, a little more confused sometimes, but still there. Still the heart of this place. Still teaching us what it meant to build something that lasted. Derek caught my eye across the room and nodded. Not an apology, not anymore. Just an acknowledgement. We were here. We were showing up. We were family again, complicated and imperfect and real. And that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.